Shadow work. Why embracing your dark side is the only way forward. Your brain makes 95% of its decisions without asking you. That's not a metaphor. According to cognitive neuroscientists, we are conscious of only about 5% of our cognitive activity. The rest, the decisions, the impulses, the emotional reactions, happens below the surface. Here is what makes this wild. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute used fMRI brain scans to predict people's decisions up to 7 seconds before the subjects consciously knew what they were going to choose. 7 seconds. Your brain had already decided. You just hadn't been informed yet. So who is making these decisions? A version of you that was programmed before you could think, before you could question, before you could choose. Carl Jung called this version the shadow. And until you understand it, until you integrate it, you're running someone else's code. Part 1. What the shadow actually is. First, let's clear up the biggest misconception. When people hear dark side, they think evil, violent impulses, destructive urges, the monster in the basement. That's not what Jung meant. The shadow isn't your evil twin. It's everything about yourself that you pushed underground to become acceptable. Here is how Jung defined it. The shadow is that hidden, repressed, for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality whose ultimate ramifications reach back into the realm of our animal ancestors. But here's the part most people miss. Jung also said the shadow doesn't consist only of morally reprehensible tendencies, but also displays a number of good qualities, such as normal instincts, appropriate reactions, realistic insights, creative impulses. Read that again. Your shadow contains your good qualities too. Your hidden strengths, your suppressed creativity, your unrealized potential. Jung called this the golden shadow, the withheld courage, hidden talents, repressed passion, and stifled creativity that you locked away because at some point, someone made you believe those parts of you weren't okay. The shadow isn't just your darkness. It's your wholeness. And you can't access your full power while half of yourself is locked in a cage. Part 2. How the shadow forms. You weren't born with a shadow. You built one. Early in childhood development, you learned where the line between acceptable and unacceptable is. Cross that line, and you suffer. Rejection, punishment, disapproval, the pain of social backlash. So you adapted. You pushed down the parts of yourself that got you in trouble. Here is the mechanism. From infancy through childhood and adolescence, you picked up from your parents and carers both conscious and unconscious messages about what was acceptable in terms of your body, your feelings, and your behavior. Everything unacceptable got suppressed and repressed. And here is the critical insight. You didn't just internalize what was unacceptable. You internalized your carers' attitudes toward those qualities. Your parents thought anger was dangerous. You suppressed your anger and developed shame around ever feeling angry. Your teachers thought ambition was arrogant. You suppressed your drive and felt guilty whenever you wanted more. Your culture thought sexuality was shameful. You pushed that underground, and now it leaks out in distorted ways. Eventually, you don't even need external punishment. You inflict it on yourself. The inner critic running your life is just an internalized version of every authority figure who ever made you feel wrong for being yourself. Psychologists call the imprint period the window when these core beliefs get installed, roughly the first 7 years of life. By age 7, the rough draft of your shadow is complete. The rest of your life, you're either running that program or learning to rewrite it. The data on childhood programming. The landmark Adverse Childhood Experiences study quantified this. The numbers are staggering. 63.9% of U.S. adults reported at least one adverse childhood experience. Adults who had experienced 4 or more ACEs showed a 12 times higher prevalence of alcoholism, drug use, depression, and suicide attempts. ACEs can decrease your overall life expectancy by nearly 20 years. According to a large study conducted in 21 countries, nearly 1 in 3 mental health conditions in adulthood are directly related to an adverse childhood experience. This isn't soft psychology. This is hard data showing that what happened to you before you could form conscious memories is still running your life today. Part 3. The neuroscience of your unconscious. Here's where it gets wild. Your unconscious mind processes roughly 11 million bits of information per second. Your conscious mind, about 40 bits per second. Read those numbers again. 11 million versus 40. Your conscious mind isn't running the show. It's barely a passenger. The Max Planck Institute study I mentioned earlier showed this directly. Using brain scans, researchers could predict what decision a person would make up to 7 seconds before the person consciously knew they had decided. The researchers concluded, many processes in the brain occur automatically and without involvement of our consciousness. This prevents our mind from being overloaded by simple routine tasks. But when it comes to decisions, we tend to assume they are made by our conscious mind. This is questioned by our current findings. Earlier research by Benjamin Libet found similar results. Unconscious brain activity began approximately half a second before subjects consciously felt they had decided to move. The implication is uncomfortable. Your conscious mind might be more of a narrator than a controller. It tells you a story about why you did what you already did, but it wasn't the one making the choice. The amygdala hijack. Your brain has two key players in emotional processing. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic, planning, self-control. This is the rational you. The limbic system, including the amygdala, responsible for emotion, survival responses, fear. This is the reactive you. Here is the problem. The amygdala is faster. It evolved to keep your ancestors alive in a world of predators. It processes danger signals before your prefrontal cortex can think rationally. By the time you can think clearly about a situation, the fear response has already fired. The anger has already surged. The old pattern has already taken the controls. This is why willpower fails. You're not fighting a fair fight. The emotional brain hijacks the executive brain before it even knows there is a battle. Your shadow lives in this faster system. The patterns encoded in childhood run on the limbic highway, bypassing your conscious attempts at change. Part 4. The cost of ignoring your shadow. What happens when you pretend the shadow isn't there? It doesn't go away. It leaks out. It projects. It sabotages. Physical health. A 12-year study tracking 729 people found that high emotional suppression was associated with a 35% increased risk of all-cause mortality. Research by Pennybaker and colleagues demonstrated that individuals who repress their emotions also suppress their immunity, making them more vulnerable to illnesses ranging from common colds to cancer. A 2022 University of Pittsburgh study found that women who suppress their anger are 70% more likely to develop carotid atherosclerosis, linked to cardiovascular disease and stroke. Your shadow isn't just a psychological concept. It's affecting your physical body right now. Projection. Here is one of the most important concepts in psychology that most people never learn. Whatever you refuse to acknowledge in yourself, you will see in others. Jung went as far as to suggest that if psychological projection at a collective level became too widespread, war would be the likely outcome. In relationships, projection creates chaos. You idealize partners, projecting your positive shadow onto them. They seem perfect because you're seeing your own disowned potential in them. Then the honeymoon ends and you demonize them, projecting your negative shadow. The very qualities that initially attracted you become sources of intense conflict. The pattern repeats until you realize you're not reacting to them. You're reacting to your own unintegrated material. Self-sabotage and addiction. According to the self-medication hypothesis, substance abuse is often an attempt to cope with specific forms of emotional distress. Research found that individuals with substance use disorders demonstrated greater use of expressive suppression compared to controls. People who can't process their emotions find other ways to numb them. Self-sabotage follows the same pattern. Procrastination, comfort eating, picking fights in relationships, resisting intimacy and vulnerability. All of these are shadow material expressing itself sideways. You can't outrun what lives inside you. The upper limit problem. Here is where shadow work meets success. Psychologist Gay Hendricks, after 21 years teaching at University of Colorado and decades of clinical work, identified what he calls the upper limit problem. All of us have an internal thermostat that limits the levels of success, love, creativity, happiness, and well-being that we allow ourselves to enjoy. This thermostat setting depends on upbringing, limiting beliefs, fears, and things told to you growing up. When you exceed your unconscious limit, you self-sabotage to return to your set point. Hendricks identified 4 underlying fears driving this. 1. Feeling fundamentally flawed and unworthy of success. 2. Fear of disloyalty and abandonment. Success means leaving loved ones behind. 3. Fear of the burdens from success. 4. Fear of outshining others. These are shadow beliefs. They live in the unconscious, and they're actively limiting how much success, money, love, and happiness you will allow yourself to experience. Research published in the International Journal of Behavioral Science found that approximately 70% of high achievers experience imposter syndrome at some point. That's your shadow telling you that you don't deserve what you have earned. Part 5. The golden shadow, your hidden potential. Now here is the part that changes everything. Jung called the shadow the seat of creativity. Your unrealized potential is hiding in the same place as your darkest fears. Think about it. You didn't just suppress negative traits in childhood. You suppressed anything that seemed unsafe. Maybe confidence was arrogant. Maybe creativity was impractical. Maybe ambition was selfish. Maybe power was dangerous. So you locked those away too. Your golden shadow, the withheld courage, hidden talents, repressed passion. is the unfulfilled potential you failed to develop because of fear and a lack of risk-taking. This is why envy is such a powerful diagnostic tool. What you envy in others is often your own disowned potential. You see it in them because you refuse to see it in yourself. Jung found that all his patients began engaging in self-expression, drawing, painting, dancing, sculpting, fictional writing, at a certain stage of inner work. When they integrated their shadow, creativity unlocked. Studies in creativity research show that self-judgment suppresses divergent thinking. Most creative blocks come from fragmentation. Part of you wants to create, part fears being seen, part tries to be perfect, part needs permission, part is still hurt by past criticism. These are all parts of the shadow, and they're fighting each other. The energy you spend managing your shadow, keeping it suppressed, avoiding triggers, navigating around your wounds, is energy that could fuel your greatest work. Integration isn't just healing. It's unlocking. Part 6. The integration process. So how do you actually do this? First, understand what integration is not. It's not killing your dark side. It's not eliminating parts of yourself. Jung warned against this. He called it enantiodromia, being possessed by the shadow. If you try to destroy it, it just gains more power. Integration means acknowledging what is already there, bringing the unconscious into consciousness, making the darkness visible. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The research on outcomes. Studies on Jungian psychotherapy, which is essentially structured shadow work, show remarkable results. Before therapy, 60.4% of patients reported their well-being as very poor. At follow-up, 86.6% rated their global well-being as very good, good, or moderate. 88% could be described as achieving normal health state. Effect sizes were large, meaning the changes were substantial, not marginal. And here is the key finding. These improvements remain stable over a period of up to 6 years after completion of therapy. Shadow work isn't a quick fix, but when done properly, it creates lasting change. Jung's 3 stages. Jung mapped the individuation process, becoming whole, into stages. Stage 1, confronting the shadow. You become aware of the disowned parts of yourself. You stop projecting them onto others. You acknowledge they exist within you. Stage 2, integrating the anima and animus. You integrate the unconscious feminine or masculine aspects of your psyche. This is deeper work, dealing with how you relate to others and to life itself. Stage 3, realizing the self. You experience wholeness, not perfection, but integration. All parts of yourself working together rather than fighting each other. Jung said the encounter with the shadow is the apprentice piece. The encounter with the anima and animus is the masterpiece. You have to start with the shadow. Part 7. How to start. Shadow work isn't something you complete in a weekend workshop. It's lifelong practice. But here is how to begin. The mirror technique. Whatever triggers you in others is your shadow. Make a list. What traits do you strongly dislike in other people? What behaviors make you irrationally angry? Who do you judge harshly? These are mirrors. You react so strongly because you're seeing disowned parts of yourself. The arrogance you hate in your coworker? There is arrogance in you that you haven't accepted. The neediness you judge in your ex? There is neediness in you that you haven't integrated. This isn't about blame. It's about recognition. The envy technique. Whatever you envy reveals your golden shadow. Who do you envy? What do they have or do that creates that feeling? The creative person who ships their work? The confident speaker who owns the room? The person who asks for what they want without apologizing? That envy is a signal. It's pointing at your own disowned potential. You wouldn't notice it in them if it didn't exist as a possibility in you. The childhood questions. Ask yourself, what were you told was wrong about you as a child? What aspects of yourself do you hide from others? When do you have disproportionate emotional reactions, where your response doesn't match the situation? These questions point directly at shadow material. The answers reveal what was suppressed and why. The parts framework. Internal family systems therapy offers a useful model. It assumes you have multiple parts, subpersonalities with their own beliefs, fears, and motivations. 3 main categories. Managers. Parts that try to control your life to prevent pain. The perfectionist. The planner. The critic. Exiles. Parts carrying painful emotions and memories. The wounded child. The shamed self. The abandoned one. Firefighters. Parts that take over when exiles produce too much pain. The addict. The rager. The one who numbs out. The key insight. All parts have good intentions. Even the destructive ones are trying to protect you. They just learned distorted strategies in childhood that no longer serve you. Journaling. Stream of consciousness writing is a raw window to yourself. It helps you learn to be honest with yourself, and you discover things from your unconscious you didn't expect. Try this. Draw a line down the middle of a page. On one side, write the parts of yourself you like and accept. On the other, write what you dislike, judge, or see in others that you would never want in yourself. That second column is your shadow map. Part 8. What most people get wrong. A few warnings before you dive in. Shadow work isn't a quick fix. This isn't something done in a short period of time, a class, a workshop, or an event. It's lifelong work. The shadow forms over years. Integration happens over years. Be suspicious of anyone promising rapid transformation. The shadow isn't only negative. Most people focus only on their dark traits. But the golden shadow, your hidden potential, needs integration too. Sometimes the hardest thing to accept isn't that you have darkness, but that you have greatness. Integration isn't identification. Acknowledging your shadow isn't the same as acting it out. Someone with suppressed anger doesn't need to become aggressive. They need to recognize the anger, feel it, and learn to express it appropriately. Jung warned that if Jekyll doesn't integrate the shadow consciously, Hyde takes over unconsciously. Integration means the conscious self stays in charge while making room for all parts. Spiritual bypassing. Both religion and modern spirituality have a tendency to focus on love and light to their own doom. This overemphasis on transcendental, feel-good elements results in phobia of whatever is too real, earthy, or dark. The result? Spiritual teachers with unacknowledged shadow material that eventually explodes. Financial manipulation, narcissism, God complexes, and worse. True spiritual development includes shadow work. Skipping it doesn't make you enlightened. It makes you dangerous. The reality hacker's perspective. Here's how I think about this. You can't optimize a system you don't understand. You can't hack reality while 95% of your mind is running programs you didn't choose. The upper limit problem, imposter syndrome, self-sabotage patterns, relationship projection, these aren't character flaws. They're buggy code. Code that was installed before you could consent. Code that's still running every time you unconsciously pull back from success or push away love or numb yourself from feeling. Shadow work isn't therapy for broken people. It's reverse engineering the system that has been running your life since childhood. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's your unrealized self, waiting to be integrated. The game isn't about eliminating darkness. It's about becoming whole. Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. Most people will avoid this work their entire lives. But you're not most people. You're a reality hacker. And this is the next level.